So when people are desperate, they're willing to go to any length to solve the problem. And in my program of recovery, we talk about the gift of desperation. People say that phrase all the time. It's like, I was given the gift of desperation. A lot of people could use the gift of desperation because they kind of live lives of quiet desperation. It's this low-level discontent, dissatisfaction, anxiety, depression. It's big enough to be an irritant, sap the joy out of life, but not big enough that, they're going to go do the work. Or they may have big amounts of desperation, but the systems they're in, like Christian organizations or churches, won't give them the leeway to do it, right? Or they've been trained up in a theology that says that's bad, right? And that's a recipe for disaster.
Welcome to this episode of the Modern Day Missionaries podcast. Today we're talking about addictions, and we're talking about the big, obvious addictions that I think we're all pretty aware of, and we're talking about some of the sneaky, quieter ones that we might not even know that we struggle with. And we're talking with author Ian Morgan Cron, who's written a number of best-selling books. He's a renowned Enneagram expert, he's a priest, loves Jesus with his whole heart, and really looks into, in his new book, The Fix, the 12 steps and how they can be used to help us find freedom in Christ. It's a powerful conversation, and I really invite you, whether you feel like you struggle with an addiction or not, to listen to Ian's definition of an addiction and use it as a chance to search your heart and see if the Lord might be calling you into some change and transformation, because he's got some amazing things for you on the other side. So with that, let's dive into today's episode with Ian Morgan Cron. Ian, thanks so much for joining us today on the podcast. We're so glad to have you.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're going to be talking today about addictions, about your book, The Fix. And I just want to jump right on in. Let's start personal. In The Fix, you share about living with hidden brokenness. And I think a lot of missionary leaders feel exactly that. They feel torn between this pressure to be strong. And I'm a missionary. I'm here to save the lost. And this internal struggle they might have with addiction, compulsion, burnout. Have you ever had to lead while secretly falling apart on the inside?
Multiple times, serial times, going back 40 years. Are you kidding? I don't know anyone who's been in ministry for any period of time that hasn't had seasons where they were leading while falling apart. That is not for a privileged subset of the population. That is normal. And sometimes your best work is done in the midst of leading, in the midst of your own falling apart. It just depends on how you think about what falling apart is. I think about Henry Nouwen, who wrote that his first really great book was called The Wounded Healer. And that's what people in ministry are. They're wounded healers. And you only get in trouble when you think you're just a healer. You have to remember you're a wounded healer. And actually, it's your wounds that actually qualify you for the role you're in. Now, you have to handle those wounds well. You have to steward them well. But when they are properly stewarded, they actually are the best thing on your resume.
And I'd love to just even dig into that a little bit more for missionaries who might be having those internal struggles. How do they know when they can keep leading and when it's time for them to do something about it? I mean, you share in The Fix how you just came to the end of yourself and had to do something about it, something dramatic.
Eventually what will happen if you have, for example, an untreated chemical addiction or behavioral addiction, like porn, overeating, there's so many of them. Or you have some kind of unhealthy attachment to another person that has addictive qualities, which happens. You will eventually come to the end of yourself. And oftentimes this stuff will come out on its own, right? Like it will become apparent to everybody around you that this is no longer working, right? And if you're able to continue in your work, but you know that you are, withering on the inside, then you have to take steps on your own to seek out the kind of help that you need, because these problems actually that we'll be talking about actually fester best in the dark. Like,
Yeah.
they have to be brought into the light. And, sunshine is the best medicine. And so to bring it into the light is really, really an important part of the healing process.
Yeah. Well, and would you mind sharing a little bit of your story? Because, like you said, you've been in ministry and this has happened before. And for people who are listening, I don't know, there's kind of a little bit of relief in knowing, like, hey, I'm not the only one. Like, there is hope on
Oh
the
yeah.
other side of this.
Yeah, sure. So I was first introduced to the rooms of recovery and the 12 steps in decades ago, when I was a young man and had a problem with drinking. And I attended meetings for just a couple of years, had sort of a cursory familiarity with the 12 steps, worked them a little bit, but my desire to drink was expelled, and I just didn't touch anything for decades. Like, I never touched a mood altering substance for decades. And then in 2020, I had a relapse that, was surprising, and went to treatment for 30 days, and was able to work on the problems that were fueling that behavior. And I live to tell about it. And in the book, I do. The book, to be clear, is not, The Fix isn't a memoir. I've already written one of those. This is a book really about how the 12 steps of recovery, which are this beautiful gospel oriented, it's a design for living, would benefit people who are in recovery. So people who already know, I got a problem, and this is my program of recovery. This is how I stay sober. But let's just say you're someone listening and you're like, I'm not an addict. Oh my gosh, I'm not an alcoholic. I've never touched drugs. I'm not into, I don't have any addictions. This is a great book for you, because if alcoholics and addicts can derive revolutionary benefits from working the 12 steps, imagine what somebody who doesn't have an addiction, how they would benefit. So it's a program of living for everybody. And that's the point of the book, right? If everyone worked the 12 steps, we'd have a better planet. And they are a evidence-based, time-tested program of living that outlines a way of living the gospel that would help everybody.
Yeah. Okay. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm not in any type of addiction right now, and I got a ton out of the book. And you really point that out, that everybody's addicted to something in some way, shape, or
Yeah.
form. There's these big
Yeah.
obvious addictions, but there's underlying ones. Like, I love when you talk about the story of the prodigal son, and you say the prodigal son and the older brother were both addicts. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Well, it's the younger son, right? It's the one that seems most public and clear, right? This kid
Yeah.
takes off, and he sounds like an addict. He's narcissistic. He's a wastrel. He is somebody that doesn't care about how his compulsive behaviors are impacting his family, and but he has this moment where he changes his mind, or as it says in the text, comes to his senses. And he turns around and he goes home. All right, that's a pretty obvious analog. But the oldest son is addicted to his self-righteousness. The oldest son is addicted to just a distorted way of thinking that he can't get himself out of, that many people find themselves in and can't get their way out of. And so they both have these kind of addictive qualities that are really just part of the human condition. I think that people think it's like some special subset of the population is really the addicts and alcoholics. Poor them. And I'm like, okay, well, actually, a great Christian psychiatrist named Gerald May once wrote in a book called Addiction and Grace, to be human is to be addicted, and to be addicted is to stand in need of grace. And so really, like, I could give you a list of addictions. I actually have one in the book that isn't anywhere near complete, right? But I mean, workaholism, that's an addiction. People pleasing, substance abuse, technology, pornography, approval seeking. How about control? The need to control other people and circumstances. relationship addictions, food addictions, weight and dieting addictions, shopping and spending addictions, gambling addictions, people who fix other people to avoid fixing their own problem addictions. Like it goes on and on and on. And so these are behaviors that are compulsive, they're mood altering, and they have negative consequences. That's all you need to diagnose it as a therapist. That's all you need to see in order to diagnose an addiction. Compulsivity, mood alteration, and negative consequences. So that's everybody.
So given a definition of what addiction would be in a general sense.
That's kind of it, right? Like it's
Yeah.
an unhealthy compulsive relationship with a person, a behavior, or a substance that has mood altering effect and negative consequences. Now, let's just go a step further out. There's a great quote in from G.K. Chesterton, and he writes that, "Show me a man knocking on the door of a brothel, and I'll show you a man in search of God." Now, what's he saying there? What all addictions have in common is that they are really disordered, misguided searches for God, right? It's the search for soothing, for comfort, for being seen, for feeling safe. But of course, it's a misguided, disordered love is what it is. And when you understand it that way, you begin to realize, oh yeah, that is everybody. Like we are all in relationships with things that in the early church, they would have called them attachments. Now we call them addictions. We all struggle with this, right? And the problem is that no matter how mild they are, they all diminish us.
They do. And I'm just thinking for all of our listeners right now, as you gave that definition and unpacked that, what is something in your life that fits that definition? And I'd love to even ask a little bit beyond that. Like, okay, let's connect this actually to the steps. You talk about the steps. And that first step is admitting we're powerless. And I think about people in ministry. I think about people in general. Like, who likes to say they're powerless? How do you even get people to go to that first step?
Oh, it's not that hard, really. I mean, listen.
Tell us how, Ian.
Well, okay, just go read Romans 7. Let's just start there, right? Why can't I do the things that I want to do? Why can't I stop doing the things I don't want to do? Why can't I, you know what I mean? It's like, that's a guy who's talking about an addictive bottom.
Yeah.
Right? Like if someone says to me, I don't have an addiction, I go, how about sin? How's that? How about the compulsive need to play God?
Right.
All right. So, I mean, listen, people have a very narrow sort of naive definition of addiction. It's like you are addicted to all kinds of things that you can't stop doing, even if you want to. On your own unaided willpower, you are powerless in the face of them. Right? Yeah. If you don't believe that, I don't know how you could call yourself a Christian. I just don't even know theologically how you can skip that step. Right? And without saying, I am powerless in the face of my broken condition, and I need a power greater than myself to extricate me or to lift me out of this. Hello?
Story of salvation.
It's just, hello, right? So step one should not. Now, you're going to run into this a lot, right? It's not like you just do the steps once. You do them over and over again. I have to remind myself every day, I'm not just powerless over alcohol or substances. I'm powerless over what my adult children choose to do. All right? I mean, I can try to control them, but that's another addiction. That's called codependency, right? and so I don't, I mean, it's like I laugh with friends all the time. I say, you can't sneeze and not pee yourself. So how do you think you're so powerful and have so much control? You can't even control your bladder. I mean, seriously, like we need to get honest about what we have, but that, about the truth of our conditions.
Yeah. But, I think so many Christians, we have this at first admission of powerlessness, and we turn ourselves over to the Lord and accept salvation. But then we think we can do the rest. Like people fight against powerlessness. And you talked about being addicted to control.
Yeah.
I mean, control and saying I don't have the power to get over it. It's
Yeah. So what you're talking about is very important. Many Christians, particularly Christianity in its Protestant evangelical expression, they have good intentions. And on this score, they're wrong. Much of what they do is actually a project of reformation. So reformation meaning, on my own unaided willpower, I will make myself more Christ-like. I am going to make myself, by virtue of my own willpower, a good Christian. I call that taping fruit to trees.
so great.
Right? And you're just making yourself a moral experiment. I'm going to fix myself. And when it works, I'll give Jesus the credit, but really it was me. Right? All right. So that has very limited, possibilities for success. What the gospel describes is actually what the gospel says is that reformation is absolutely impossible, is what it says. It's absolutely impossible to do this, and unnecessary, actually, right? What we want is transformation, not reformation. And transformation is what happens when you give God consent to do for you what you cannot do for yourself, which is change. Now that's transformation.
Yeah.
Now, what reformation yields is older brothers from the prodigal son again. It yields people who are like, I'm working so ding dang hard for you, and what do I get? No one's giving money to my mission. What, are you kidding me? It's like, well, what you're going to get is resentment, frustration, disillusionment, disappointment, right?
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff that may later on, by the way, need a substance to go away. So you just end up in a bit of a mess, right? Or you become a self-righteous prig, right? Somebody who's like, look at how good I am. Oh, look at what I have done with myself, right? Grace, which is where transformation is found, is when we just say to God, I can't. So if you look at the first three steps, here's how they would be read in short. Number 1, I can't. Step 2, he can. Step 3, I think I'll let him. That's it. I don't know why we make the gospel so hard, and yet it's really quite simple.
That was one of my favorite parts of the book. I have that actually written down because it's so simple. And you referenced Romans 7 earlier, and that transition from Romans 7 to Romans 8 is exactly those three things. Mm-hmm. Paul is just saying like, hey, I can't do this. I am powerless. I don't have what it takes. And then Romans 8 sweeps in and it's like, hey, there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
And you are not controlled by your flesh. Yeah. You are controlled by the Spirit. And so that's that transition. Here's somebody who can do it. Jesus did it for us. Are we going to let him?
Yes. And so that's why I oftentimes tell people, like, they'll say to me, I'm trying to be a good Christian. I go, then you probably don't understand the gospel. Trying to be a good Christian. That's not the gospel. The gospel is you are beloved without trying. Like you, it's not, you can't earn it. That's an earner's mindset. Right? Which is an elder son.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. So talk a little bit more about that balance between grace and effort. I don't even know if balance is the right word.
Yeah, no,
grace
it's a
and
mystery.
Effort.
It's a mystery. It's a mystery at some level. So it's almost like trying to say, well, which one comes? It's like looking at a pair of scissors and trying to figure out which of the blades is responsible for cutting the paper. It's like, I don't know. It's like kind of both and, but I don't, it's like, I don't know. So the thing grace isn't opposed to effort. It's opposed to earning.
Yes.
And that's the big difference. It's not opposed to effort. It's opposed to earning. If you see your effort as an earning proposition, then it's a problem. If you see your effort as just cooperating with God's hope and desire for your life, then I think it's okay, as long as it doesn't go haywire, right? and become me competing against myself to become a better Christian.
Hmm.
That's just a recipe for frustration and disillusionment. Ultimately, you will burn out from
Yeah.
trying to doing that kind of work. And if you meet a Christian who's like, I'm just burned out on Christianity. I can't. It's like, well, then you're not doing it right. You're trying too hard. It's really comes down to, again, I go back to this idea because it's a very important word in the spiritual life. I think give God consent. That's the key. It's giving God your permission to do things inside of you that you can't do for yourself. And that's,
Wow.
to me, the key to transformation. And by the way,
Yeah.
that is a lifetime project to learn how to give God consent. That is not as simple as just saying it out loud. To make that shift on the inside is fairly dramatic for, stiff-necked people like us.
Oh, yeah. Well, and letting go sounds like this incredibly passive thing. Like, oh, I'll just let God do it. That is one of the
Yeah,
hardest things you will ever do in your whole life.
yeah, and yes, and by the way, it's if that's not the way you see it, I question your understanding of the gospel. I just do. I mean, I just question your theology of grace. Like,
Yeah.
um, I in my understanding of all the relevant texts, um, you know, so much of the gospel could be reduced down to this kind of tired trope, but it's just let go. Let go.
Hmm.
And when you let go, it's just amazing. You discover that love has you, right? And you're never going to find that out until you let go.
Yeah. So that letting go process, as we talk about grace, as we talk about effort and action, and looking at those 12 steps, you really begin with some of those like mental and spiritual ascents, that letting go, that I am powerless, God, you are. At what point in the 12 steps do you start to see it transition from a letting go and an invitation to grace to moving into some of that action and effort where they begin to blend together?
Yeah. So when you get through steps 1 through 3 are very actually kind of, 1 and 2 are not action steps, right? They're more like an internal shift, right?
Yeah.
We admit we're powerless over blank, that our lives have become unmanageable. Unmanageability could just be emotionally unmanageable. It could be just relationally unmanageable. It doesn't have to be losing a car or your job or your reputation or whatever. Unmanageability has a lot of different looks, right? I'm assuming, Stephanie, that you've had moments in your life, maybe in the past week, where you felt emotionally unmanageable.
Oh yeah, I am
Yeah.
human. So yes.
Yes. Okay. So unmanageability. Then, then the next two steps are came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Well, there's God, and we're saying to God, I think you can restore me to wholeness. Then 3 is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. We'll talk about as we understood him later if you want to. But the point is that the first 2 steps are just interior shifts in the interior world. And the third step is an action, but it's not very demanding. It's just making a decision. When you get to 4 and 5, which are made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, then 5 is admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. You start getting in there. Now we're going to have to start putting pen to paper. Now we're going to have to do some work. And the work is in 4 through 7 is looking inwardly and doing the work of inventorying that which is standing as an obstacle between us and a relationship with God that we desire. And also, it is about what's standing between you and the relationship you have with yourself. So when you start to look inward, you're going to find all kinds of historical resentments you've been holding on to. You're going to find out about character defects and defenses that have always been sitting in there. You just don't know what to do with them because there's just too many, and so you're just going to go in there and you're going to do it with a kind and compassionate gaze. You're just going to go in and just look at all the stuff that's in there. And you're also going to find is part of that inventorying process, that there are parts of you that are incredibly beautiful that you've disowned, that actually need to be reclaimed. So it's going in, just doing the inner work. 8 and 9 is made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And 9 is made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, so watch what's happening. 1 to 3, mend and deepen my relationship with God. 4 through 7, mend and deepen my relationship with myself. 8 and 9, mend and deepen my relationship with others. It just sounds like the gospel to me. This is all about how do you love God, yourself, and your neighbor with your whole heart, soul. You know what I mean? Like it's just the gospel. And then 10 through 12 is how do I develop a lifestyle that supports health and growth in each of those 3 domains of my life moving forward? Rinse, lather, rinse, repeat. Start again. Just keep doing the steps. And as you do the steps, your relationship with them changes over time. And very soon you'll find that the numbers fall away and you're just reflexively drawing on the wisdom of multiple times throughout the day, things that you read about in the 12 steps. And you're like, oh, and they're just gospel principles. That's it.
Well, and they were written by a guy who was a Christian. So they are founded in faith.
Well, actually they're grounded in there was a group called the Oxford Group, and they were around the 1930s. They were a Christian organization based, I think, in Manhattan. And they had 6 steps. Bill Wilson, the founder of AA, was a part of the Oxford Group. He took the 6 steps and then broadened them out to 12, right? And he discovered that they had this amazing ability to help people who were deemed hopeless. And he himself, I don't think you could say that Bill was necessarily a Christian. He was sympathetic.
Gotcha.
Dr. Bob, who was kind of the co-founder of it, was very much so. And so their roots are in the Christian tradition, and there's not one of them that you could say is in opposition to the gospel. No way. They're all completely right in alignment with it.
Oh, absolutely. I remember when I was in my master's program in counseling, and they had us attend a group, and you could pick, any type of support group. And so I went to a codependency group, and they went through the 12 steps. And I mean, this was just 4 or 5 years ago. I had never heard the steps before.
Yeah.
And it was really powerful being in a room of people who were all saying them out loud together. And it was just such a new experience. And that really ties into something I wanted to bring up too. These steps are not meant to be done alone. I mean, so for a missionary who's listening, who thinks like, okay, so then I can just take these steps and I can work them, and then I can fix myself, and then everything's going to be good. What would you say to that person?
Well, first of all, if they're saying they're going to fix themselves, then whoever they're ministering to is in trouble.
Right.
So we get sick alone and we get well together. That's just how it works, right? We get sick alone, we get well together. It's interesting. When you watch beer commercials on television, have you ever noticed that the beer commercial is always watching people in community? They're playing beach ball. They're having a great time. They're at a bar. They're at a club. They're dancing, right? They're with other people. They never show you the guy who's overweight sitting on his couch with 2 6-packs watching football alone on a Saturday, polishing off 8 beers. Do you know what I'm saying? They don't show you that guy.
You're right. I never thought about that. You're absolutely right.
They don't want you to see the truth. Right? I'm not saying that that those people don't exist in community doing those things. What I am saying is that people tend to get sick by themselves, right? And in secret often, right? It's a secret of sorts. And so being in community is important because the opposite, according to Johann Hari, of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection.
Wow.
Right? So it's interesting, right? The steps are about reconnecting with God, self, and others. It's about connection. And, so it makes sense that the solution is connection with other people who are on a shared journey of healing. And if you're in the mission field and you have access to the internet, you have access to meetings. So whether or not you're in OA for overeating or NA for drugs or alcohol, I mean, there are hundreds of different kinds of AA meetings, or not AA, but 12-step meetings for
Yeah.
different mental health challenges or addictions. Nobody could say, I don't have access to a meeting if they have a computer. It doesn't matter where they are. So, part of it is, are you willing to go there? Now, if you're not, I get it, right? Maybe you're like, I don't really have a. Great, then get 5 friends, get the workbook with my book, and sit down and form a little group and go through the steps together. Have a little community. Make it for 14 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it is, and just do the steps and see what happens.
And this also could be something that could work for people who don't have like a classical addiction. When I say classical, I mean like the big ones, like you were talking about the 12-step groups. But for people who are people-pleasing addicts or control addicts.
Yeah. Listen, if someone's listening right now and they are absolutely dead set up against the idea that they have any addictions or attachments, number one, you're going to have to fight with thousands of years of Christian teaching. But let's just say you do that. Okay. The steps would still radically improve your life were you to do them as instructed.
Yes.
If you just did the steps, your life would be dramatically better. So even for the person who can't cop to an addiction, all right, fine. Still do the steps and tell me that it didn't actually really improve your life.
Just looking at steps 1 through 3, I'm like, you know what? I could even stand to go through that again and remind myself of how unable I am to do anything of value without Jesus. I mean, that's
well, there you go.
That's an antidote to pride right there.
Yeah. I mean, and again, these are these weird paradoxes. They're all over the gospel. And for many people, they are a stumbling block, but regardless, there are these paradoxes all over the text where it's like, yes, you are a sinner, and yet, but more precisely, and this is an important distinction because they're very, very different. When I hear people say I'm a sinner, I'm like, okay, not entirely true. You are a beloved sinner. You're a beloved sinner. That's different than just saying I'm a sinner. When you say I'm a beloved sinner, what it's saying is, yes, I am, morally and spiritually a mixed bag of good and not so good, but you are beloved. And if you don't get those two words together, you're going to have a pretty twisted view of yourself and of God.
And it is. I love that you bring up the paradox because it is. I mean, it's a cliche saying too, but it's that whole "I'm imperfectly perfect." Or
for example, this idea that you are both. As a friend of mine likes to say, "I'm broken and I'm beautiful. I'm a saint and I'm a sinner." It's like you are a mixed bag. You are full of contradictions, right? We can't just say everything about me is bad. I don't think even my intuition can't buy it.
No. Well, and then we think about how that interweaves with our identity too. So for me, I like to say, without Christ, I'm a sinner. Before Christ, I was a sinner. But who am I now? I'm the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus. But the second I forget and think that has anything to do with me, then I jump back into, that former identity. So it is. We live with the tension of being completely and utterly redeemed by God and living in this flesh, this body of flesh that still sins. And we can't forget either one. No,
that's also really hard. And I think God has compassion on it. It's being human is super hard. And God knows because God chose to become a human and knows how hard it can be. It's hard.
It is
we just have to own the fact it's hard.
Okay. Speaking of hard, I'm just thinking of you. What was that like for you being a person who is well known, who is in ministry? The shame that must have come with admitting that powerlessness, checking yourself in, getting help. And again, I think this is helpful for our missionary listeners to hear because they live public lives. There are people watching them and supporting them. And sometimes the thought is, I can't do this because what will happen if everyone knows? And you took that brave step.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're locked in a toxic system. I have a friend of mine I write about in the Fix, who's a pastor of a large church, and he had a drinking problem. It happens. This is what humans do. Okay, it's just what humans do. All right, and his elders found out through an embarrassing moment in church, and rather than find him help, which is what I would think a church would do, they fired him, which I think is heinous. But nonetheless, there we go. And I'm in a 12-step meeting with him at a different church in the basement of another church one day. And he says, it's so ironic. He said, I have found more love, grace, kindness, support, welcome in the basement of churches with a bunch of alcoholics, more than I ever found upstairs in the sanctuary.
Wow.
He said, I wish the people upstairs knew what was available to them in these rooms. The problem is we live in these systems that are very unhealthy in organizations and systems, and where people are not allowed to be human, to go on, to have misadventures, which is crazy when you read about all the misadventures people go on in the Bible. I mean, it's just like, this is what humans do. Why should any of us be surprised? I'm like, sometimes very rarely have I had anyone say to me something like, I'm so surprised with that happened. You're such a well-known guy. You write books and you're a priest and you're this, right? People don't generally say, maybe they think that. I don't know. They can think whatever they want. I can't control that. But ultimately I'm like, are you reading the same book I'm reading? Like, what made you think that anyone is exempt from coming up with kooky strategies for making life more tolerable? I mean, you and I are not maybe talking about the same religion here. And so, I can't shame. Of course there was some embarrassment, shame, humiliation, blah, blah, blah. Well, this is the price of admission, right? To going to a new place. That pain is is God's way of announcing we're going to a new place.
Yeah.
Right. And we tend to be so moralistic. It's painful. What if you began to think of your struggle with an addictive behavior or with a substance or something? What if you began to understand it more like an invitation from God to a new place of intimacy with him that you previously didn't know existed? What if you realized this addiction is a summons to a new relationship with myself, with God, and with others? That's going to be really beautiful. But I got to do the work. But it's going to be beautiful, right? But instead we get all morally and older brothery, and we start finger wagging and, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, listen, I've been the pastor of a church before, and I would never do it again. I'll tell you now, never again. I serve as a volunteer priest at a parish in Nashville, but I don't go to staff meetings. I'm not involved in anything except show up on Sunday. How can I help? Right? That's it. Now, that's the best job ever. And, one of the reasons I wouldn't go back is because of this crazy expectation on the part of communities that their pastors are superheroes.
Yeah.
Right. And you know what happens? You know what crowds do whenever someone falls from grace, the crowds think it's delicious in a strange way. And then they eat their own.
Oh, man. It's so hard to hear you say it, but it's so true.
Well, it is true. And so that's why, and I can recommend places to you where people can get healing and help, specifically pastors, missionaries, people like that, where they can go and get help from people that will not judge them. You know what I mean? Like, look, Stephanie, let me put it this way to you. Some people will say, oh, Bob's got a drinking problem. You've heard that, right? So I would, the way I would reframe that, when people say that, I go, okay, let's be a little more precise with our language. Bob doesn't have a drinking problem. Bob has a drinking solution. The drinking isn't the problem. The drinking is the solution to a problem. And it's a misguided solution, But, human beings periodically do misguided stuff. So what has to happen is we need to obviously stop the behavior because it's dangerous. And also because we can't work on the real problem until that stops. Right? So we then stop that. And then when you work on the real problem, what does it do? It eventually renders unnecessary the need for an outside solution to this internal problem. Just makes it unnecessary. And then what do you get? Sobriety.
So well said. And so that's really the question. If somebody finds themselves in any of these addictive behaviors, it's asking themselves, what am I trying to meet? What desire, what need am I trying to meet?
And by the way, that's what the 12 steps actually uncovers. So they all sound very simple on the surface, but when you start to work them, you realize, oh, these are quite deep, right? Yeah. This is actually quite deep, right? And it's a difficult and rewarding and also very joyful and sometimes hilarious journey, right? Yeah. As we would expect anything, God's about laughter. So there's going to be plenty of that. A lot of eye rolling. But it does require, in many instances, some outside help to help us move through that process, whether that's a community and a sponsor or a therapist or somebody that can help us get under the hood and find out what's broken so that we stop using, again, what I said earlier, right? External solutions to internal problems. That's like going to the hardware store to buy bread. You are going to be very disappointed every time you get to the register. You're looking for something, understandably, you're looking for something that can't actually deliver what you need it to.
And that's a big and a deep question. And it's not one I don't think we can really solve on our own, because if we knew the answer to that question, we wouldn't be doing the addictive behavior. But it is, if you can sit with it.
Well, and that's why the 12 steps are not a self-help program. That's what people think. Oh, it's a self-help program. No. If yourself could have helped yourself, wouldn't yourself have helped yourself already? I mean, that's, it's like, no, it's not a self-help program. The 12th step says this: having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message to blank fellow sufferers and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Now, that is the purpose of the steps. The steps facilitate a spiritual awakening of sufficient force that it expels the need for compulsive behaviors or relationships with substances or people that are unhealthy, right? And so now you've completely reordered your interior world by grace.
That's so powerful, Ian. It really is. And it's one of those things, if people can get a hold of this and be willing to pay the price of admission, like you said, what's awaiting for them on the other side? And I think that's a big piece of it, is people can see there's a huge cost to pay, but they can't envision what's on the other side. What am I really paying for? Is it worth it? Because the cost of this is so high. And so how can people stir themselves up to get that vision for what is awaiting them?
The people I feel the sorriest for are people who aren't desperate enough to do anything. So when people are desperate, they're willing to go to any length to solve the problem, right? And in my program of recovery, we talk about the gift of desperation. People say that phrase all the time. It's like, I was given the gift of desperation. It's like, and people think, oh, I'm going to stay away from it. It's like, you know what? A lot of people could use the gift of desperation, right? Because they kind of live lives of quiet desperation. It's this low level discontent, dissatisfaction, anxiety, depression, low level, right? It's big enough to be an irritant and make life, sap the joy out of life, but not big enough that, they're going to go do the work, right? Or they may have big amounts of desperation, but the systems they're in, like Christian organizations or churches, won't give them the leeway to do it, right? Or they've been trained up in a theology that says that's bad, right? And that's a recipe for disaster. I do, and by the way, as I said to you before we hit record, I have a friend of mine who has a thriving counseling practice, and the number of missionaries that they do intensives. So they're like week long or 2 week long intensives. So people come in from Ghana or from, wherever, and they're on fire. Their lives are on fire. And it could be about porn. It could be about any number of things. It's not just addictions, but there's a lot of addictions that show up at his door. And oodles of them are missionaries. Interesting enough. So missionaries are not exempt from these things, So, and yet I feel bad for them because they are stuck inside of systems that don't give permission to people to fall apart. Because you will fall apart. The question is, will you fall apart well?
That's a great way of saying it. Yeah. Well, and you're right. That is something I think in the missions world we need to take a better look at, is how do we be there from people and not just keep yanking them and pulling them from the field whenever we see their lives begin to fall apart, because otherwise they will keep it in secret, like we were talking about earlier, and things just fester in the darkness. And so then they will implode or explode.
Yeah, and hurt a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Not intentionally, but it's just
byproduct,
collateral damage.
Yeah.
Right. Now, there are instances where a person needs to go away for a week or two and be with a therapist and do intensive work to get themselves back on track. Right. Yeah. So I think that's important. Like sometimes you do have to step away from the day to day in order to do this work, or at least get started.
Yes.
Right. And then you go home armed with new tools and also other ways to continue the process of growing and changing. But you don't have to necessarily do that. You could just, decide I'm going to start this journey on my own, or I'm going to get like one of the things I talk about in the fix is get 5 people together and do these steps together.
Yeah.
Like don't do them in isolation, do them with somebody else. Just go do them. And here's how.
And we'll post links to some of these different options. Obviously, we'll be linking to all of your stuff, Ian, because I think that is such an accessible way for people to step right into this. And we'll also post links to places where you can get away. I mean, I know I got away for a week. It wasn't because of an addiction I was in, but it was because of a bad place I was in. I just was like struggling with a lot of stuff from having lived 10 years on the field, and just the punches that you take as a result of putting yourself in a type of a spiritual war zone and in a difficult situation. And that week away, I went to Onsite, which is a place
I know it very well.
I'm sure you do. Yeah. And it was incredible. That was life-changing for me. Yeah. And so I think that sometimes that's what people need. There's another place called Alongside where they do 3-week intensives from a Christian perspective up in Michigan, and all different options that people have. But like you said, it is getting to that place of desperation. Or for somebody who maybe is not at that place of desperation, get desperate before you need to get desperate and go, okay, I'm going to do something. I don't want to get to that point.
Yeah, I know. I always tell people, I have an expression. I say, you get to pull your chute at whatever altitude you choose.
Ooh, that's good.
So you can pull at 10,000 feet or 1 foot. It's better to pull at 10,000 than at 1 foot, or wait until you hit the ground. It's much better to pull first. That's the smart move.
Yeah. Well, even for me, as I was reading through the book, it was such a great moment of self-examination, going, okay, are there some things that are creeping in my life that I need to weed out? Are there some things that could become some type of addiction? Like you said, maybe not a obvious one, but those sneaky little internal ones that we can hide, that we don't always see. And so it's good. It's good. And it's like a good conversation to have with other people as well. Ian, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us today. This is the kind of stuff we need to talk about more in ministry and in missionary spaces. So thank you for having the conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yes. And we will post links to all the things that we talked about. And we look forward to seeing all of you missionaries on our next episode.